Hello, students. Welcome again to chapter 2. Today seems to be 32°F and it's snowing. And I'm sure you all too are receiving snow in New York City. I'm going to share my PowerPoint lecture with you. Do a new share screen. And today's topic is chapter 2, Chemical Context of Life. So as I always start with analyzing the title. In the first topic, we talked about living organisms and organismic biology, the characteristics of living organisms. Now, in the chemical context of life, we are looking at the chemical reactions taking place in our body, as well as the chemical components of all living organisms. So we know that all living organisms are composed of matter. And matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. So what then is the living matter present in our bodies? In addition to the cells, the tissues, the organs, the organ systems that we talked in the first chapter, which is the hierarchical organization, we also have non-living components such as elements, compounds, atoms, molecules. So let's define what then is an element. An element is anything that an element is a substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances by chemical reactions. We will be looking at a list of elements and the scientific notation in the periodic table in the following slides. What then is a compound? A compound is a substance which consists of two or more elements which are present in a fixed ratio. So what then is the classic example of a compound that we all require for sustenance is water, H2O. So you have H, hydrogen atom, element, oxygen element. But when you look at H2O, H2O is it stands for two atoms of hydrogen with one of oxygen. So that's the fixed ratio of water. The compound has characteristics that are different from those of the elements. So hydrogen has its own characteristic in water, oxygen has its own characteristic, and in combination, when two atoms of hydrogen combine with oxygen, you get the water molecule or water compound, which is 2:1 ratio. If we look at slide number 6, these are the elements in the human body. And I would like you to refer to a periodic table. So you just can Google in a periodic table. You'll see all the list of elements and the scientific notation, or what we call symbol. The most common elements that we need to know are oxygen, the symbol is O, carbon, C, hydrogen, H, nitrogen, N. And if you take note, you will see, if you notice, they begin with the first letter of the spelling, and they're always capitalized. Now let's look at calcium. Calcium is a salt. The first letter is in capital and the second letter is in lowercase. So calcium, the scientific notation is Ca. Phosphorus is capital P, potassium K, sulfur S, sodium. Now you notice sodium is not S because S was sulfur. Sodium is derived from a Latin name, natrium, which is therefore the symbol is capital N lowercase a. Chlorine is a gas, Cl, magnesium, Mg. And there are many more elements in the periodic table. These are some of the more common elements in the human body. So I like you to remember this group, what I call the CHON group, C-H-O-N. That's the acronym which you must remember because it's going to help you when we discuss organic compounds or macromolecules in the following chapters. However, there are some elements called trace elements. From the very word trace, these elements are required in our bodies in small quantities. And those elements will be boron, B, chromium, Cr, cobalt, Co, copper, Cu. It's derived from the Latin name cuprid, fluorine, F, iodine, I, iron, Fe, ferrous is the Latin name. Manganese, capital M, lowercase m. Molybdenum, Mo. This is not such a common element, what we use in our day-to-day life. Selenium, molybdenum, selenium, you don't really hear it too often. Silicon, we hear, capital S, lowercase I. Strontium, Sn, which is tin, and vanadium. So zinc, copper, manganese, fluorine. Now aluminum is capital A, lowercase l. If you talked of gold, gold is derived from aurum, capital A, lowercase u, gold. Silver is Ag, argentum, the Latin name, Ag. And I'll put that information in the slide. So this is the periodic table that we looked at. But we know that in the elements of life, about 20 to 25% of all the 92 naturally occurring elements are called essential elements because they are required for us or for the living organisms. And 96% of the living matter is what we call this group CHON. Capital C, which I like to put this acronym H, O, and N. So CHON group, I call it the CHON group, C-H-O-N. So take note of the CHON group. Now you will notice in my PowerPoints that I have colored keywords. So the keywords should arouse your curiosity and it should indicate to you they are important terms, concepts which will be underlined. And we've seen the remaining 4% consists of calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur. So we know what calcium stands for. Calcium is capital C, lowercase a. I can put that into the bracket. We can put phosphorus, it's capital P. Potassium is not P, but it is K. So take note of potassium, and sulfur we know comes from the notation capital S. So coming back here now, we've seen all the elements, and here we've noticed, we've seen that an example, classic example of water is H2O. I'm not putting it in the superscript, which stands for 2 atoms of hydrogen with 1 of oxygen, H2O. Another element, we are looking at 2 different elements to form the compound. We are seeing sodium, natrium, Na, chlorine. We know chlorine is a gas, but sodium is a metal. It's a silvery white metal. Now, every day, what do you eat? You don't eat sodium. You are eating sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is referred to as table salt. So sometimes I hear people very loosely saying, oh, I'm eating sodium. No, you cannot eat sodium because sodium is a metal. Can we digest a metal? No, it's solid. But this is the fascination. When a metal combines with a gas, I would not inhale chlorine gas. Yes, our lungs can sustain small amounts of chlorine gas. Where do we come across chlorine? When you open the bleach bottle, chlorine. But if it's concentrated, you'll have strong fumes coming, which burn your eyes. When you go to a pool, they chlorinate a pool with chlorine gas. But very often when you are swimming in a pool, especially in hotels or in public pools, you've noticed if the concentration of chlorine is very high, it could be toxic to your lungs. And what happens is your eyes become blood red. I mean, they redden up because of the strong fumes and odors. So to put it into perspective, how is sodium chloride formed? When sodium, a metal, combines in a chemical reaction with chlorine gas, it now forms an edible substance called sodium chloride, which is table salt. And that is what we add to our foods when you're cooking your food. And some people like to use the salt shaker. Too much of salt leads to hypertension, high blood pressure. So we don't want to keep eating excess of sodium. And where would you find all these? What type of foods would contain high concentrations of sodium? Is our preserved foods, your canned goods, because they have to preserve it and prevent it from spoiling. So you will see if you read the labels on any of the canned goods or on any of the ready-made dinners that you buy, frozen dinners, you'll see very high content, 560 milligrams, 800 milligrams, 1012, 1200, 1200, very high intake of sodium. And we are not supposed to, our daily intake of sodium is not that much, okay? So just FYI, how you could take care of yourselves and live a better, productive and healthy life. So we come to the next slide, 7. So now we're looking at what then is an atom. An atom is the smallest particle of an element that has the ability to retain the properties of that element. So all those elements that we talked about, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, sodium, chlorine, they are all existing in an atomic state. They are all existing as atoms also. It's the smallest particle of an element, atom. If you're looking at sodium atom, the smallest particle of that sodium element, which has the ability to hold on to retain the properties of sodium is an atom. Now, when you look at an atom is round. And so what does this atom contain? An atom consists or contains 3 subatomic particles. Subatomic comes from the word part of an atom. So the 3 subatomic particles that are present within the whole atom is a neutron. So I like to call it, I'm just going to rearrange it for you here. A proton. I'll tell you why I am calling it proton, electron, and a neutron. Oops, sorry. So I called it proton, electron, and neutron because I want to give you this acronym. I always teach with acronyms and code words so that you can remember it. So I'll put it into parentheses here, what I call PEN. So P is proton, E is electron, and N is neutron. N. So we have protons, which are positively charged subatomic particles. Electrons are negatively charged subatomic particles, and neutrons have no charge. They have no electrical charge. Therefore, they are neutral. Because they don't carry a charge. So the way you can remember it is P. This is the way. P proton, positive charge, electron, negative charge, and neutron, no charge. N, no charge. Therefore, because they carry no charge, they are neutral. Okay. So let's go on now to what then is present in the center. The center of the atom contains both protons and neutrons. So I've put the formula P plus N. The neutron mass and the proton mass are almost the same. And the unit to measure the mass is called Daltons. Now, we've seen in the periodic table, all these elements, 96 of which are important, 92 of which are important. These various elements, they're going to differ in the number of their subatomic particles. Therefore, we need to know the term, what do we mean by atomic number? Or the way I remember my information, I think of number as one word. So atomic number refers to the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom. Where would I find protons? Always in the nucleus of an atom. What then is the mass number? Remember, what is the mass? If I'd asked you, what is your mass? What is your weight? Your weight is a numerical number, which is on account of the cells, the tissues, your bones, blood, etc. That gives the mass. So mass is always a larger number. Remember, atomic number is one thing, so it's smaller number. because it's only determining the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom, and mass number would be the number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus. So when you look at an atom's nucleus, that determines or refers to the mass number, P plus N. And so it has to be larger than the atomic number. And when you look at what is the atomic mass, it's the atom's total mass that can be approximated by the mass number. So we always look at the mass number, and you'll have an approximation of the atomic mass, which is approximated to the mass number. We'll go into the mass number, atomic number, and I'll teach you how to determine the mass number given the atomic mass, the atomic number of an element. So the next slide here, we're looking at atomic number and atomic mass. So here you have hydrogen atom. Always remember, what is the atomic number for hydrogen? Atomic number for hydrogen is 1. Now, if you looked at an atom, this is an atom, this is the nucleus of an atom. What did we see in the nucleus of an atom? In the nucleus, you always have P plus N, protons and neutrons. What are protons? Positively charged subatomic atoms, particles. What are electrons? Negatively charged. Now, what are we placing in an atom? In this atom, you can see there are different rings. These concentric rings are called electron shells or orbitals. What would you find in an orbital? Only electrons. So negatively charged particles called electrons, they revolve in an orbital. So how do we define an orbital? An orbital is an area in space around the nucleus in which electrons revolve or are found. You will find electrons only in orbitals. Therefore, what are the properties of these orbitals? What is important about an orbital? Every orbital can only hold a maximum number of electrons. Therefore, we go into what we call the octet rule. So every orbital, I repeat, every orbital can hold a maximum number of electrons. Every orbital can hold a maximum number of electrons. And then we know that this orbital, therefore, which holds a maximum number of electrons, has to satisfy, has to also satisfy what we call the octet rule. comes from the word octa, octave, which means it can only hold 8 electrons, a maximum of 8 electrons. Octa. Okay, so therefore now, if the orbital can hold a maximum of 8 electrons, let's go back to illustration here. What is the atomic number? So I need you to refer to the table, and you must know atomic number and mass number of, I'm going to write down in my slide, these basic ones, which would be carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, because we need them for chemical bonding. So you will see that in my slide as to which atomic numbers and mass numbers you need to know, in case they are not provided in the exam. So atomic number for hydrogen is 1. What does atomic number determine? The number of protons. Now remember, you are not placing protons in the orbital, but proton number is always equal to electron number. And so if you have 1 proton, it means it's equivalent to 1 electron, and therefore you will place 1 electron. Therefore, the total number of electrons will determine how many orbitals you need to draw or that atom will contain. So in this case, hydrogen atom has 1 electron. It has one atomic number 1, which is equivalent to 1 electron. P is equal to E. So I will draw 1 orbital. Let's look at carbon. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What does the 6 total number indicate? That the atomic number of carbon is 6. So now, how are we going to place the electrons? Every orbital has to satisfy, we said, this octet rule. Therefore, the first orbital can hold maximum 2 electrons. Six minus 2 would be 4. But the second orbital can hold a maximum of 8 electrons. It can hold 8 electrons. Third orbital can hold 8 electrons. So on. Fourth, fifth, etc. So this is the maximum capacity that each orbital can hold. So if the first orbital can hold 2 and carbon is 6, so we have, I'm going to put here example, carbon. Let's put carbon, which we normally don't spell. Carbon is 6. Therefore, what is it equal to? It would be equal to 2 in the first orbital. 6 minus 2 would be 4. So carbon has 2 and 4 electrons. Therefore, it tells you that you have to draw 2 orbitals. So first orbital is the orbital adjacent to this nucleus. 2 electrons. It can hold no more than 2, maximum 2. Why do I write 4? Because carbon's atomic number is 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll talk about about chemical bonding later. And when can an atom form a chemical bond? Let's first understand the concept of distribution of the electrons in various orbitals. And this distribution of electrons in various orbitals is referred to as electronic configuration. A little complex word, but we're going to analyze the term electronic configuration, which is the distribution or the arrangement of the electrons in the various orbitals or in the different orbitals. Electrons are always in different orbitals. You never find electrons in the nucleus. And so it is very important to understand what is the electron configuration, as we use electron configuration for placing electrons. Let's go to nitrogen. So once again, what's the total number for nitrogen? You have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carbon had 6, nitrogen has 7. Oxygen will have 8. So first orbital can hold 2 electrons. The adjacent first orbital adjacent to the nucleus can hold a maximum of 2. Second orbital, so we are going to go with if nitrogen is 7, you have, I'm going to put it here, nitrogen 7. Nitrogen is equal to 7. Therefore, we are going to have 2, 7 minus 2 is 5. I'm going to put oxygen. The abbreviation, so everybody can refer to this PowerPoint slide for oxygen. And therefore, if oxygen is equal to 8, we will have first orbital can hold a maximum of 2, 6. So we can clearly see this. Oxygen has 8. First orbital 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And chlorine gas, chlorine has a total number. Chlorine, which is a gas, has many more. So capital C, lowercase l, chlorine has 17. Chlorine has 17. And so when you come here to chlorine, let's put the electronic configuration here. So first orbital can hold 2. Second orbital can hold a maximum of 8. 2 plus 8 is 10. 17 minus 10 would be 7. So how many orbitals would chlorine have? 3. We've looked at carbon, 2 orbitals, nitrogen, 2, oxygen, 2. But now as you go into more complex elements, you'll see the number of orbitals will increase as the atomic number increases. So as the atomic number increases, the number of orbitals increase, since the number of electrons are also going to increase. So when you look at chlorine atom, you have to draw how many orbitals? 1, 2, 3. First orbital has 2, second orbital 2, 4, 6, 8, and third orbital would be 7, 2, 4, 6, and 1. So let's go now to the next PowerPoint slide. What then are isotopes? Iso comes from the word iso, same, equal, like an isosceles triangle in mathematics. So all atoms of an element, they will have the same number of protons, but they have different number of neutrons. The neutron number changes, but the proton number stays the same in isotopes. So what then are isotopes? When two or more atoms or elements differ in their neutron number, they are the isotopes. We have radioactive isotopes. From the very word radioactivity, they're going to emit radioactive waves or radiation. So they decay spontaneously, thereby giving out particles and energy. Where do we use radioactive isotopes? We use them as diagnostic tools in medicine. Today, we use a lot of radioactive isotopes. The radioactive tracers, they are being used to track all the atoms through the metabolic processes. And what's metabolism? Metabolism is the sum total of all the chemical reactions that take place in our body. That's metabolism. All the chemical reactions taking place during digestion, etc. Radioactive tracers can be used to track atoms through metabolism. We have today the PET scanners that can monitor the growth and metabolism of cancers in the body. And we're going to see an image. How through PET scanning, you can identify a region in the throat and using this radioactive isotope to see the pathway, metabolic pathway, as to where the cancer, to identify the region or the area which is cancerous or carcinogenic. And so we see here in this individual's throat, there is a tissue which is cancerous. And it would not be detected or diagnosed without the aid of these radioactive isotopes or radioactive tracers that are injected into the body. So let's go now to seeing, we're keeping on talking of atoms, its behavior, and the chemical behavior of the atom we've seen is dependent on the distribution of the electrons in the various shells. And if you went in the periodic table from left to right sequence with respect to the elements in each row would correspond to the addition of the electrons and protons. So the number, atomic number, would keep increasing from left to right on the periodic table. So let's look now at some more elements. And we're looking to see at the atomic number and atomic mass of these elements to get a deeper insight now. And we see here the electronic configuration that we've talked about already for most of the elements, the carbon ones. How do we write, or how can we identify the atomic number and the mass number? So always remember, the smaller number, as I indicated to you earlier, is the atomic number. It is referring to the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom. So when you look at He stands for helium. Helium is a gas, one of the lightest gases. It has an atomic number, which is the smaller number. Number of protons is 2, which is always equivalent to the number of electrons. Proton number is equal to electron number. Do not forget that. And the larger number, we always use whole numbers. So atomic mass will be approximated to number 4, would be the mass number, atomic mass is 4. And that refers to proton and neutrons in the nucleus of an atom. So we've seen hydrogen. It has only 1 electron, therefore 1 orbital. Electronic configuration is 1 electron equal to 1. Lithium now has 3. So first orbital would have 2. 3 minus 2, 1. That's the electronic configuration that determines the total number of orbitals and the electrons that it contains. Beryllium, 4. So you'll have 2 in the first orbital, 2 in the second. Boron, 5. 2 in the first orbital, 3. We've talked about carbon, we've talked about nitrogen, we've talked about oxygen. Fluorine is 9. So you'll have 2 in the first, 9 minus 2, 7. Neon is 10, so you'll have 2. Second orbital can hold 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and this 2 is 10. Sodium has 3. Sodium had 11. We talked about chlorine, 17. Sodium has 11. Therefore, its electronic configuration is equal to first orbital can hold 2, 2. Second orbital can hold 8. 2 plus 8 is 10. And comma 1, 11 minus 10 is 1. So you have 3 orbitals. Third shell. First electron shell, second and third. Magnesium is 12. So let's talk about the electronic configuration. 2, comma 8. 8 plus 2 is 10. 12 minus 10 is 2. So first orbital 2, second orbital 8, third orbital 2. I would like you to go through each of these elements with their atomic numbers and practice the electronic configuration. So you can go through aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, argon. Practice. I would like you to draw each orbital, determine the electronic configuration with the atomic numbers information. Okay. So now we've seen the electronic distribution here too. Hydrogen 1, carbon 6, nitrogen, oxygen, chlorine. I need you to practice all these elements. Let's now go to valence electrons. A lot of terminology and concepts. What are valence electrons? Valence or valence electrons are electrons always that are present in the outermost shell or orbital, the last orbital. So let's get back to this illustration here. This is the valence electron for hydrogen, since hydrogen has only 1 orbital. What would be the valence electron in carbon? It's the second shell, electron shell or orbital. That's the outermost, last orbital. In nitrogen, once again, it's the second orbital. In oxygen, second orbital. But in chlorine, the outermost, it has 3 orbitals. So the last orbital is contains 7 electrons, and this would be the valence electrons, and the orbital is referred to as valence orbital or valence shell. So that's the information here. So we're going to see how atoms are going to interact with each other in order to complete their valence shell and be stable. Now, in all these examples, we've seen all these valence shells are not complete. And therefore, all these atoms are unstable. And what happens if an atom is unstable? They burst. We want stability in nature. And so we're going into the segue of how does an atom which is unstable become stable? The only way atoms can become stable is to form chemical bonds. So what then is a chemical bond? In my opinion, a chemical bond is a force of attraction that exists between 2 or more atoms. So normally, if you were synchronous or face-to-face in the class, I would ask you to hold hands with your adjacent partner. So if you were holding your hand, it depends on how you're holding the person's hand. Whether you hold it lightly. I'm holding it lightly, so I can easily pull away my hand. But if I'm holding the hand of the adjacent classmate tight, see, it's difficult for me to pull my hands. I need tremendous force to remove it. So that force of attraction between 2 or more atoms is a chemical bond. But when are chemical bonds formed? Only when the atoms have incomplete valence shells. So the outer valence shell, last orbital, is incomplete. Then only will the atom combine with another atom to become stable, because they are unstable. And we don't want atoms to be unstable. So chemical bonds are of 3 types: covalent, ionic, and I like to use this adjective called weak hydrogen bonds. So immediately you associate the term with the hydrogen bond, and you know which would be the weakest type of chemical bond: hydrogen bonds. And we'll see that covalent bonds are the strongest bonds. And remember, if you're holding your hands or clasping your hands tight, I need tremendous amount of energy or force to break that bond. Weak bonds will require little or no energy to break it. See, I can easily remove my hands, not holding it tight. And so let's go now to what is covalent. The way I remember my information, covalency, you're sharing with somebody. So covalent comes from the word sharing. So covalent bond is a bond that is formed when the atoms are sharing a pair of valence electrons with each other. The keyword is sharing of a pair of valence electrons. Where can covalent bonds be formed? They can be formed between atoms that have of the same element or atoms of different elements. So hydrogen, H and H, that is, let's look at water, H2O, two different elements, or I could have nitrogen and nitrogen, oxygen and oxygen. There's no C2, carbon, okay? You have N2, nitrogen is a gas. Oxygen is a gas. O is not a gas. O is an element. O2 is a gas, but there's no C2. There's no carbon gas, but there's carbon dioxide gas. Carbon, C, plus 2 atoms of oxygen, C plus O2 would be carbon dioxide gas. So you have two different elements, carbon dioxide, but in nitrogen, we have the same elements. Nitrogen plus another nitrogen atom is equal to nitrogen gas, N2. So we looked here at a molecule. It's consisting of two or more atoms that are held together by covalent bonds. Molecules are always held together by covalent bonds. And I've given you an example of a molecule. H2O is a molecule. It's in the compound state too. O2, oxygen, N2, CO2, they're molecules also. Carbon dioxide gas. Covalent bond, there are two types. You have a single covalent bond and you have a double covalent bond. What's the difference between a single covalent bond and a double? Think of the word single means one. So a single covalent bond is a bond in which there is only sharing of one pair of valence electron. Double, two pairs of valence electrons. So if you look at the two types of covalent bonds, you'll have polar and non-polar covalent bonds. Polar comes from the word polarity, opposite charges. And the first word you associated with polarity, immediately you should think of water molecule. Opposite charges, water is composed of two atoms of hydrogen with one of oxygen. So when you look at the slide here, water consists of two hydrogens with one oxygen atom. And because, always remember, this symbol in Greek is delta. Hydrogens are always electropositive. Oxygen is always electronegative. And we're going to see why oxygens are electronegative. Now we studied earlier, we've talked about electrons are negatively charged subatomic particles. If I'm an atom, and we look at this in the ionic bond right now, okay, we will come to the term ion, and that's when I'll discuss about electropositivity and electronegativity. Why oxygen is always an electronegative atom and why hydrogen will be electropositive. I'm just going to keep that thought for the following slides. So polarity, polar covalent bond, you mark these slides important. Very, very important. The way you're going to remember is through association of terms. Polar, first example that comes to your mind, water. There is unequal sharing. So a polar covalent bond is a bond that is formed when there's unequal sharing of a pair of electrons between two atoms. Hydrogens are always electropositive. Oxygens are always electronegative. And we must know that When there are more electronegative atoms, the electrons are going to be attracted to the more negative atom. And because of this unequal sharing of the electrons, it is going to cause this partial positive charge on hydrogen and negative charge on oxygen. So we can see hydrogen gas would be for same atoms. So would that be a polar or a non-polar? If polar is unequal sharing, then what happens for non-polar? In non-polar, electrons are shared equally. So if you looked at hydrogen, what would we say? Is there equal sharing of valence electrons or unequal sharing? Therefore, would it be a polar molecule or non-polar? Remember, the atoms are the same, hydrogen, hydrogen, they're both positive. Electrons are shared equally. Hydrogen has atomic number 1. It has this electron here. This hydrogen atom has 1 electron, valence electron. Now, because hydrogen atom combines with another hydrogen atom in the chemical reaction, the resultant molecule is H2, which is hydrogen gas. Therefore, now hydrogen gas is stable because it has shared a pair. There is sharing of a pair of electrons. This hydrogen atom shares its valence electron with this atom. This hydrogen atom shares this valence electron with this hydrogen atom, resulting in H2 gas. And now hydrogen gas is stable. How do I know it's sharing? When there is overlapping of the hydrogen atoms. When you overlap, there is sharing. If this hydrogen atom was by itself and this hydrogen atom by itself, no sharing. The moment they come together, there is sharing. And that's the formation of the covalent bond, sharing of a pair of electrons, valence electrons. And so we could see hydrogen atoms being shared in the cloud. If you go to the notation of the single bond and the double bond, covalent bond, single, one line, one dash between the two hydrogen atoms, one valence electron is shared. Therefore, it's a single covalent bond between hydrogen atoms. Oxygen is represented when you have two lines, double bond, double covalent bond. We had single covalent and double. Double covalent bond indicates two pairs of valence electrons are shared. So oxygen atom will combine with another oxygen atom to form oxygen gas, O2. Hydrogen will combine with another hydrogen atom, like we saw here, to form hydrogen gas. But this is a single covalent bond. One valence electron is shared, and oxygen will have two. Okay. So this can be abbreviated further with the molecular structure. We know when two atoms combine together, they form the molecule, and hydrogen gas is a molecule. So we denote 2, telling you how many atoms, number of atoms of hydrogen have combined in the chemical reaction. So let's look at the Lewis dot structure and structural formula. If you took chemistry, you may have learned all these basic concepts. And it doesn't matter if you haven't learned chemistry, I am teaching it to you in detail. So hydrogen gas, we've seen hydrogen, hydrogen, single covalent bond. Oxygen, because it has two valence electrons, because it has, oxygen is O, atomic number 8, 2, and 6. So it's sharing 2 to satisfy the octet rule because it has 6 in the valence shell, 6 valence electrons. It is unstable. To become stable, it goes through a chemical reaction combining with another oxygen. So it shares the 2 electrons, satisfying octet rule, thereby having a total number of 8 valence electrons. Water, you have 2 hydrogen atoms combining with oxygen. Again, oxygen has atomic number 8. So you have 2, 6 valence. Where does it get its 2 more to satisfy octet rule? All of them overlapping. This hydrogen giving 1, this hydrogen giving 1, thereby water molecule being stable with 8, satisfying the octet rule, having a total 8 electrons. And therefore, here we are going to see, because hydrogen is sharing, electrons are negative, oxygen has a negative charge. It's more electronegative than hydrogen. Now, we never talked earlier, I've not made a mention of methane. Methane is a gas. You have one, you must know the molecular formula for methane is CH4. So you have 1 carbon atom with 4 of hydrogens. Now, why would carbon combine with 4 of hydrogens? Comes back to the atomic number of carbon. What was the atomic number of carbon? 6. So electronic configuration, 6 is equal to, first orbital can hold 2 electrons. 6 minus 2, 4. Is carbon atom stable? No, it's unstable. What can carbon do to become stable? It can only combine with, it could combine with 2 of oxygen to form oxygen carbon dioxide gas, or to get 4 more electrons, it would combine with 4 atoms, 4 atoms of hydrogen, because each hydrogen atom has a valence, 1 valence electrons. So carbon first orbital, I reiterate, carbon's first orbital, 2 electrons. How many valence electrons? 6 minus 2, 4. So it would have 4 here. It needs 4 more. It would get each valence electron from each hydrogen atom and form methane gas, CH4. So because it is sharing 1 valence electron with each hydrogen, it forms, a carbon is forming a single covalent bond with 4 hydrogen atoms. Therefore, what is electronegativity? It is the atom's attraction of the electrons in the covalent bond. And I just explained, the more electronegative an atom is, the more strongly it is going to pull the shared electrons to itself. Classic example we saw is in water. So always, I keep reiterating, remember, hydrogen is always electropositive, oxygens are electronegative because it is sharing the oxygen electrons. It has always 4 valence electrons for oxygen it needs. So when it receives electrons, it is becoming negatively charged. And that's what we are going to talk about in an ionic bond. So what then is an ion? An ion is a charged particle that is formed either when an atom donates an electron or it is going to accept or gain an electron. So to put into perspective, if I am an atom and I am unstable, I could be unstable for two reasons. One, because the number of valence electrons, the outermost orbital, has more than the number the capacity it can hold. So if the valence orbital has 9 electrons, second orbital can only hold a maximum of 8. What do I need to do to become stable? I need to donate my electron, give away my electron. What charge is an electron? Negative. If I give away my negative charge, what do I become? More positive. Let's take the opposite scenario. I am oxygen atom. I have 4 valence electrons. I need 4 more. So I'm going to bond with other atoms. So those atoms are going to now give me the electrons. They donate the electrons to me. When they give away the electron to me, I am becoming negative. Why? Because an electron has a negative charge. They gave their negative charge to me. They gave their electrons to me. I become more electronegative. What then do they become? They become more positive. They become electropositive because they gave away their negative charge. So it's very important to understand this basic concept. When an atom donates or loses an electron to another atom, it becomes positive. When the atom gains an electron or accepts an electron from another atom, it becomes negative. Therefore, positively charged ions are called cations and negatively charged ions are called anions. And both anions and cations are going to attract each other, thereby forming this ionic bond. So what is an ionic bond? An ionic bond is a bond that is formed due to the attraction between opposite charges. So we're going to look at a classic example of an ionic bond. And that classic example is sodium chloride table salt. I showed you the chemical reaction right in the beginning. We saw sodium is a silvery white metal. Chlorine is a gas. Both are inedible. But yet, when these two atoms go through a chemical reaction, the end result of end product is always an edible product, in this case called sodium chloride table salt. So now we need to understand what was the atomic number of sodium. Atomic number for sodium is 11, but I also need to know the mass number of sodium, which is 22. So if we looked at sodium here, Na is equal to 11, atomic number, mass number is equal to chlorine, on the other hand, is equal to 15, and the mass number of chlorine is 35. So we know What then 11 is equal to? How do we put 11? What is the electronic configuration of 11? 2, 8, 1. What then is chlorine's configuration? Chlorine is equal to 2, 8, 1. Therefore, what does this indicate to you? Pardon me, 2, 8, 7. Now, is it easy? We'll go to the illustration. So you had 11, first orbital 2, second orbital 8, 2 plus 8, 10. 11 minus 10 is 1. It has one valence electron. Chlorine, 2, 8, and 7. Is it easy for sodium atom to donate an electron to chlorine or for chlorine to donate it to sodium? And it's easy to give 1 than to accept 7. So sodium atom, by donating the electron, what charges an electron? Negatively charged. When sodium atom donates the electron, it's donating this electron to chlorine atom, it now becomes a positively charged sodium ion. It's a cation because it is positively charged. Why is it becoming a positively charged sodium ion? It has given away its negative charge, which is the electron, to chlorine atom. Now, chlorine atom, by accepting or gaining the electron from sodium atom, now becomes a negatively charged. Now, it's not chlorine gas, it's called chloride ion. A negatively charged particle is an anion. So the chemical reaction that has taken place is Na, sodium atom, plus chlorine atom gives you NaCl, which is sodium chloride salt. So to reiterate and to put it in a nutshell, sodium atom has one valence electron, it donates it to chlorine atom. By donating it to chlorine atom, it now becomes a positively charged sodium ion. Chlorine atom, by gaining or accepting the electron from sodium atom, now becomes a negatively charged chloride ion, Cl negative ion, Na plus ion. Now I want you to see the difference. These are elements, but they're also atoms. The moment, how can you decipher or distinguish an atom from an ion? An atom has no charge. The ion, when the element has a charge, it is in the ionic state. So what second important criteria to remember? When that element has a positive charge, immediately you should know that that atom has given away its electron. Therefore, it becomes positive, a cation. When the element, when that atom, when the element is in the atomic state, so it becomes an atom, has gained an electron, it becomes negatively charged. And so that atom has a negative charge. So it's no more an atom. These are now referred to as sodium ion, chloride ion. And in the chemical reaction that has taken place, it is now called sodium chloride, which is stable salt. To be very specific, we put Na plus Cl negative, showing you the ionic formation. So I've explained the number of protons. Now let's use that information of atomic mass or mass number. I gave you here in this slide the mass number for sodium is 22 and chlorine was 35. How do we use that information? What was mass number or atomic mass referring to? Number of protons, P plus N. Now, these are questions you would get in the exam. So if you know that you should know that sodium atom's atomic number is what? 11. What is the mass number? 22. What is mass number? What is atomic number? P. What is mass number? P plus N. So let's work it out here for sodium. Okay, let's work out sodium. So if Na is equal to 11 and 22, 11 is proton. So we'll get 22 minus 11 is equal to 11. So what is 11? You have 11 as proton number. 22 is P plus N. And what I can do here is, I can put here into parentheses P plus N. So you know that 22 is P plus N. I can put this down here. Mass number here we know is what? 17 plus 35 minus 17 is 18. So 11 would be equal to total number. This is proton number. This is proton plus neutron. So you have proton mass plus neutron is equal to 17 plus 18 here. Why? Because atomic number is 17, mass number is 35. 35 minus 17 would be, what does 18 refer to now? 18 would be the neutron number. So 11 neutrons. Sodium will have 11 neutrons. I'm going to put it again here. Chlorine will be equal to 35. I can put this here. Chlorine has 18 neutrons. So this is the information you will be asked. So in a multiple choice format or in any question, a question that could be phrased, if the atomic number of chlorine is 17 and its mass number is 35, what is its neutron number? So neutron number is equal to mass number 35 minus atomic number 17 is equal to 18 neutrons. And that's what chlorine would have. So I would like you to go through the periodic table, which has the list of the elements with its atomic number and mass number, and keep practicing. The more you practice, you will become perfect and you have mastered the concept. So I've put here just to show you what sodium chloride salt look like. I'm gonna just put this ahead here where we talk the sodium chloride. Okay. You can just put this also right in front here. So now let's go to, just put it here. showing you sodium chloride right near sodium salt. You'll see sodium chloride. Okay. Let's go to the next slide now. We've looked at all this. The third type of bond that we're going to be talking about is the weak hydrogen bonds. And as I made a mention that covalent bonds are the strongest and the weakest bonds are hydrogen bonds. And hydrogen bonds, when are they going to form? They are going to form when a hydrogen atom covalently bonds to one electronegative atom. Where did we see hydrogen bonds? In methane gas, carbon forming hydrogen bonds with hydrogen, hydrogen bonds with carbon in methane, CH4. You also could have hydrogen bonds in hydrogen gas, H2, in water molecule, etc. So it forms when a hydrogen atom is covalently bonded to one electronegative atom and is also attracted to another electronegative atom, as in water, two hydrogens with one oxygen. Where would I also see hydrogen bonding taking place with the more electronegative partners besides hydrogen atom? The electronegative partners are oxygen or nitrogen atoms. So hydrogen bonds can form with oxygen, hydrogens, or nitrogens. We've seen water, hydrogen more electropositive, oxygen electronegative. And this is where the hydrogen bonds would be formed. I just made a mention that hydrogen bonds can form between nitrogen atoms or oxygen. Nitrogen atom combines with 3 hydrogen atoms, and the molecule is ammonia. Ammonia is a gas. So we've seen how it combines with hydrogen bonds, or it can form with nitrogen. Now let's look at different types of interactions that exist. Van der Waals interactions, they are attractions that occur between molecules that are very close together as a result of these charges. And such interactions together can be strong, as between the molecules of a gecko's toe hairs and the wall surface. So this is a gecko. And what does a gecko do? It's a reptile. It crawls on surfaces. How does it begin to crawl? Is because the toe pads have these small hair-like structures. It acts like a suction, and it can attach itself. It sticks to different surfaces. And so they're making a comparison between the molecules of a gecko's toe hairs and the wall surfaces. The interactions can be strong. Now, I need you to remember the simple basic statement for the whole semester, because we're going to apply it in most of these chapters to come. The shape of a molecule determines its function. So shape and size of a molecule determines its function. So to put it into perspective, if the shape of a molecule is simple, the function would be simple. The size of the molecule is small, simple function. If the shape of the molecule is complex, so immediately you should think, therefore, the molecule's function should be more complex. And if the size, the larger the molecule, the more complex would be its function. So I put it into a simple basic statement: shape and size of a molecule determines its function. So to put it into perspective here, I'm not going into details with hybridization. If from a chemical standpoint, you just have to know from my chapter that the orbitals have different shapes. And the simpler the shape, the simple is its function, the more complex the shape, the more complex its function. And each orbital had a particular name. First orbital was called S, P, second orbital D, F. We are not going into hybridization. I'm just doing an overview of hybridization, not going into details of hybridization, making it more complex for you. But it's important to just know that different orbitals have different names. First orbital S, second orbital P, D orbital, third, and F orbital. And you can see here in water molecule, you have the pairs of electrons between hydrogen covalently bonded to oxygen. And it forms what we call, this shape is called tetra. Tetra, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tetra comes from the word 4. A tetrahedral structure. Methane also is tetrahedral. We'll go into details with the structure when we come to water, the next molecule, water and, the next chapter, water and life, and the fourth structural and molecular structures which you must know. So you don't need it for this chapter. Now, molecular shape, as we are seeing, shape determines function. It will also refer to how these biological molecules are going to recognize and they recognize the shape and respond to one another. So we have opiates such as morphine. We're all familiar with the drug morphine, and naturally produced endorphins in the body, which have very similar effects. Why? Because their shapes seem to be very similar. And so when the shape is similar, we know that the function should be simple and similar. So these molecules are then going to bind to the same receptors in the brain. So let us look at the shape of natural endorphins. What are endorphins? These are chemical substances that are released by the brain in the body. So we have a number of endorphins released in the body. Like you have endorphins that make you feel like dopamine. These are hormones. Dopamine, you have acetylcholine, which increases or speeds up heart rate. You have adrenaline. Adrenaline is a hormone, which is also called the fight or flight muscle. And when do you, in common language, we say, oh, I'm experiencing an adrenaline rush. When do you experience thrusts of adrenaline hormone that is being released in the body, either when you're excited or you're angry or when you are afraid? A lot of these hormones, adrenaline hormone is released. For pleasure, for pain, you have all these endorphins released in the body. So we're comparing this natural endorphin with morphine. Now, we must know when there is the atom is in black, it refers to carbon, hydrogen is gray, nitrogen is blue, sulfur is yellow, and oxygen is red. So I want you to take note of the shape of morphine, which is the drug, and shape of this natural endorphin. And what do we see? We see they have carbon atoms. We see there is nitrogen in morphine. There is more nitrogen in the natural endorphins. We see that these natural endorphins, the shape of the natural endorphin is more complex than this morphine molecule. But in our bodies, we have receptors. A receptor is going to receive a signal. This is our cell membrane, the lipid bilayer. And so on our cell membranes, you have all these receptors, touch, pressure. And so if I pinch you, what you wouldn't say, Professor Pavel, pinch me more. You would say, ouch, because you're experiencing pain because of the pain receptors, the touch receptors that send a signal that it is pain. You wouldn't put your hand over the flame because you would get burnt because of the receptors. The receptors are going to receive, they are going to sense a signal. So what happens to these endorphins and morphine? It's going to attach to the receptors that are present on the cell membrane by receiving the signal that the brain cell has relayed, and it's attaching, and thereby it enters the cell. It binds to the cell. Receptors are going to bind to the cell on the cell membrane and thereby experience the pain, pleasure, or whatever type of signal that is being transmitted by the brain. Okay. So we've talked of chemical reactions, but in a chemical reaction, I told you you could have a strong bond or a weak bond, which is the force of attraction. That's a chemical reaction. In chemical reactions, you require energy to make the bond or to break the bond. The chemical reaction contains two parts. It has reactants, which are the starting molecules in the chemical reaction, and the end product or the end result is called the products. So we're going to see chemical reaction here. Let's look at the reactants here. So something plus something are reactants. That's the way I remember in a chemical reaction. So you have hydrogen, two atoms of hydrogen reacting with two of oxygen to form H2O, but two molecules of water, two molecules of water. So H2O are the products, the end result, and the reactants are the starting molecules. Hydrogen and oxygen in this chemical reaction are the starting molecules, and the end result, water, are the products, two water molecules. So in photosynthesis, very important. Photosynthesis is a process whereby green plants manufacture their food with the help of sunlight energy, which is now converted into, so carbon dioxide gas is being absorbed by the plant. So when carbon dioxide gas reacts with water, it forms C6H12O6, which is glucose. I'm going to put glucose into parentheses here. And glucose is the energy providing molecule in photosynthesis, and oxygen gas is released. Therefore, plants are called producers because they manufacture their food. I did it in chapter explain producers, consumers in chapter 1. And so the moment you think of producers, I made a point of reference is always green plants manufacture their food during photosynthesis. So we are seeing the chemical reaction in photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide reacts with water to form glucose. So these are the reactants, these are the products. And oxygen gas is always released because carbon dioxide gas is absorbed. We humans are emitting, exhaling. We're releasing carbon dioxide gas, which is toxic for us. And in turn, the plants, green plants, are giving us oxygen, which we need for cellular respiration. That is why we say green environment, grow more trees, because it cleans up the environment. There's more recycling of the carbon dioxide toxic gas, which the plants absorb, and oxygen, which they release, which we in turn absorb. So now here we needed to balance, because here you needed 6 of carbon. So I had to put 6 carbon. So this whole equation changes. It would be 6 2s are 12 oxygen, 6 carbon. Here you would have 12 hydrogen, 6 oxygen. So you had 12 oxygen and 6 oxygen, 18. Let's go to the right side. You had, so here you have 6 carbon and 6 carbon. It's balanced. You had 6 carbon dioxide, 6 carbons, and you have 6 carbon balanced. The oxygens here are 6 and 2 is 12 oxygen, plus 6 oxygen is 18. That's why I had to put 6 here. Here you have 6 oxygen and 6 2s are 12 oxygen, 18. Therefore, this equation is balanced. That's why I had to put 6 in front of oxygen and 6 in carbon dioxide, in front of carbon dioxide gas to balance the equation. So here we are looking at carbon dioxide gas and water, which is the reactants. When sunlight energy is absorbed by the plants, carbon dioxide gas is absorbed in the presence of sunlight, uses water to form glucose, and oxygen is released. So a chemical reaction can be reversible. Reversible means you have a forward and a backward arrow. So products of the forward reaction are now becoming the reactants for the reverse reaction. So we see 3 hydrogen atoms combining with 1 nitrogen atom will give us 2 of ammonia. NH2 becomes NH3 ammonia. Okay. So what is chemical equilibrium? Equilibrium is balanced. So equilibrium is reached when the forward and this backward reaction, when the forward and backward reaction are equal. That's when chemical equilibrium is reached, and it occurs at the same rate. So the concentrations of the reactants and products are not going to change. And so with this, we finish with the topic. I hope you enjoy the topic. Please go through the PowerPoint slides and the video. And I am also putting for you a separate folder of just the PowerPoint slides, like I've already posted on Blackboard. So all the PowerPoint slides, and the second presentation would be my video presentation. Have a great one, students. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the lab every week. Take care and bye-bye.